Doing something a little bit different in the kitchen today. I'm gonna take you along while I develop a recipe. But first, pop quiz. Gold star to anyone who can tell me what this vegetable is. Hey there, welcome to my kitchen. I'm happy to have you here today. You are in my test kitchen. We are developing a new recipe. I planted way too many plants of different types of squash. At this point in my life, I'm convinced that one zucchini plant is probably too much for me, but every year I continue to do it. And so this year I vowed to myself that I would find new and interesting ways to use zucchini and share those recipes with you. This recipe is hopefully going to be modeled after something I made when I was a little girl. My version of potatoes au gratin that was just about as simple as can be. No pre-cooking, nothing complicated, just layering the ingredients and tossing it in the oven. So hopefully at the end of today, we end up with something that is buttery and cheesy and creamy, a little bit crunchy and delicious. So that's where I'm starting today. I have a pretty good idea of what will work, but we're gonna test it, and we may have something that tastes delicious and is perfect, or more likely we'll have something that I can try again and make some tweaks to make even better before it's ready for prime time. So in the interim though, the answer to our pop quiz, did you correctly identify this squash? It's called a tromboncino squash. You can let it harden, similar to a butternut squash, and eat it much later in the season, or you can pick it when it's relatively young, which is what I've done today. And it acts a lot like a zucchini. They are a delight. They're weird little veggies that one day are teeny tiny and the next day are this big. So we're gonna cook with some of those today. And of course, just regular zucchini that I have in the garden as well. So here is what I know about this dish. I wanna figure out a way to make this so it's super, super easy and doesn't require anything other than one single pot. The other thing I know is that zucchini holds a ton of water. I want to get ahead of that because I don't want to have a runny casserole at the end of this. So what I'm going to do is slice the zucchini and salt it and let it sit on a couple of kitchen towels, let it release some of that moisture, and then I'll be ready to work with it in the casserole. That is an extra step with zucchini, but I can't think of another way to get around that besides pre-cooking the zucchini. And I don't want to do that. I want all of the work to be done in this one casserole dish. Enough of my blabbing. I'm going to get into cutting up the zucchini. I do have a preheated 400-degree oven. And the only other tool I have is a 9x13 casserole dish on top of a sheet pan. So I'm going to get to chopping up our zucchini. And when I finalize this recipe, I will likely recommend the use of a mandolin so that each of the slices of zucchini is very similar in size, but I can't be bothered with that today. I'm just gonna do my best to chop them about 1/4 of an inch thick. I definitely won't need all of the zucchini, but we'll see how much I can get through. So this is kind of cool. So you can see some of the moisture coming out, which is pretty interesting. Zucchini is sliced. I've got a kitchen scale here with a big bowl. I'm just gonna measure how much zucchini I have. That is 4 1/4 pounds of zucchini. All right, next step. I'm gonna salt these pieces of zucchini. So on a couple of clean kitchen towels, I'm gonna scatter our zucchini over the top. So salt is really effective at drawing moisture out of everything, really, vegetables in particular. Any sort of a vegetable that you want to draw the water out of, I would recommend salting it. We will rinse this off at the end so that our dish isn't overly salty. And salt this. Again, the salt is not going in the dish. The salt is to draw the moisture out of these zucchini. So I probably am using like a tablespoon for every pound, so like 4 tablespoons of salt. So take note of that. 4 teaspoons salt. All right, now I'm gonna let this sit, 349. So I'm gonna let it sit for 15 minutes, and we're gonna see what that does for us. It has officially been 30 minutes, and I think this is about as good as we're gonna do. So, I'm going to pat dry the zukes, and then I'm actually gonna rinse them. They won't absorb much water when I rinse them, but that'll make sure that our dish isn't overly salted. So into a colander. Zucchinis have been rinsed. I am going to do a little weight test and see if we lost any weight. My guess is we didn't lose much at all, but we'll weigh them again and see what happened. So we were at 4¼ pounds, so 4 pounds, 4 ounces. Now we're at 4 pounds even. Okay, good. So that was a 30-minute salt plus a rinse. We went down from 4¼ to 4 pounds. Okay, the other things we need for this recipe: thyme, nutmeg, flour. This is a cup of cream, salt and pepper, an onion, and a couple different cheeses and some butter. We're gonna top with breadcrumbs. But the way I used to make potatoes au gratin, and I'm not sure if that's traditional or not, the good smells must be happening because the dogs are wandering around. The way I used to make potatoes au gratin was really simple. I just layered everything in a casserole dish and whacked it in the oven. So I'm gonna do the same thing here. First, I've got to slice up this onion. And for this amount of zucchini, it might be a better idea to have a little bit more onion, but we'll start here. So in this recipe, we've got a liquid component, we've got the flour, and those two things together, when they boil in the oven, are going to thicken to make a nice sauce. So each layer is going to be zucchini, salt and pepper, tablespoon of flour or so, and a layer of onion. So I'm just gonna get going. My goal here is to make this like the fastest path to a zucchini casserole style dish that we could possibly make. So everything I'm doing is to try to decrease the amount of time this takes. I don't mind oven time, but work time. I find when people are busy, the time it takes to put into creating something is a much heavier lift than the time it takes for it to bake in the oven. So first layer of zucchini down. I'm gonna scatter some onions over the top, salt and pepper, and I've got a full cup here, so that's the way I'm measuring how much flour I'm using. And my thought was I'd put a sprinkle, a spoonful or two, between each layer. And we repeat. And thinking about this, I might actually do a midpoint layer of butter. I'm doing this on the hottest day of the year so far. It's like 90 degrees outside in Seattle, and so everything is a little melty, even with air conditioning. Couple tablespoons of flour. And back to our zucchini. I'm going to tear a little bit of thyme. Thyme is one of those herbs that you absolutely can chop if you want to, but the leaves are really teeny tiny, so you don't need to. And since this recipe is all about speed, no chopping for us today. Okay, now I'm gonna grate some nutmeg over. You sure can use already grated nutmeg, but these little buddies add a lot of flavor. I find that anything dark green, nutmeg goes really nicely. So kale, spinach, nutmeg. Now I'm gonna dot some butter over the top. So now we're at 1.5 cups, a cup of cream, 1/2 cup of water. So you could substitute 1.5 cups of milk, you could use 1/2 and 1/2 and some water, but I think that feels about the right amount of liquid to me. So we added in 1/2 cup of water, salt and pepper. Okay, I think the last thing is our breadcrumbs, another layer of salt and pepper and some cheese. So this is a full cup of panko breadcrumbs, and I think this is the right amount. And now I'm gonna grate some cheese over the top. This isn't meant to be supremely cheesy, but I'm gonna use some Gruyere and some Parmesan, some nice cheeses just to give it a little bit more flavor, and some Parm. So that's probably about 1/2 cup of cheese. And we're gonna go in with a little more pepper. I'm not actually gonna add any more salt. I'm just really thoughtful about what salting those zucchini does to the end dish, so I want to be able to tell. And I think that's our dish. I'm gonna call that good. So it's on a cookie sheet. It's not gonna boil over. There's not that much in this casserole dish, but I'm gonna put it in the oven. I think it's gonna probably take about an hour. All that I'm looking for is the top to be golden brown. If it gets too golden, I can cover it with aluminum foil. Top to be golden brown, the zucchini to be cooked through, and hopefully there to be a nice bubbly thick sauce with it. So I'll see you in about an hour and we'll find out together. It is exactly 1 hour later and time to take our zucchini au gratin out of the oven. The one major note I've written is pay attention, and I'll show you why. My cheese got a little bit overcooked, so I wouldn't have taken the cheese that far, but that's okay. That is why we recipe test. So now I'm gonna let it cool. I'm gonna put it back on the stove and just let it cool for 10 minutes. Okay, the zucchini looks cooked but not overdone. There's not much moisture. Pretty darn good. Sometimes in the test kitchen, I completely fail, and it's something that will never see the light of day, but I think this one has a lot of potential. Here's what I liked. Really good use of zucchini. We got 4 pounds of zucchini into this dish, and it was super easy to make. I liked the combination of flavors. I think our spices work well together. I like these 2 cheeses with the zucchini. Here's what needs improvement. Cook time. We overcooked it. The zucchini is a little bit too mushy, and I overdid it with the cheese. So I'll probably start next time at about 45 minutes, start testing from there on, so that the zucchini don't get quite as cooked, and make sure that I keep an eye and pay attention to the cheese. I think we need to add a little bit more cheese, so I'd like to do cheese between each layer as well. Not a ton, but just enough to create some interest other places other than just the top. And then I'd like a little bit more sauce in this. So I think our ratio of 1/2 cup of flour to 1 cup of cream was correct. I'm just gonna bump both of those things up, although instead of using additional cream, I'll probably just use water. I'm gonna write the recipe as milk, so it would be a combination of cream and water anyway, basically. The other thing I'd like to do is add a little bit more salt, pepper, nutmeg, and thyme. I think it could use a little bit more seasoning. This one was successful though. Sometimes in the test kitchen, I make a dish and throw it away. It's not even fit for human consumption, but this one I'll likely eat. It's pretty good. Definitely room for improvement. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this little bit different style video from me today. If you liked this style of video where I take you along on the ride for trying to create a new dish, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear that from you. And if you want to see more from me, please subscribe to my channel. I hope to see you here next time. Thanks for being here. Cheers.